Hello. So there is a link to this video. Uh, yes, Paul, I did see that video. Um, not only did I see this video, I saw the previous video, and I have been contacting Archimandrite Maximus, and in the hope that we might be able to schedule a time for him to come and discuss what they discussed. I will say, I think that basically they brought up a lot of incredibly important things, both in this one and in the previous one. And the previous one had a lot of discussion. Apparently, they had 10,000 views. So I was thinking of going through this. Yeah, I think it's an important it's an important thing. I will put the link out in case people want to come on and discuss. But yeah, I thought this video is actually incredibly important. There are a few things I wanted to comment on and emphasize, but generally, I mean, I think there were a lot of things that, especially Archimandrite's father Maximus, he is which is an abbot. He's a priest, and if I understand correctly, he's a priest and a monk, and he's the head of a skete, which is more more of an ascetic. So apparently the word ascetic is related to the word skete, um, type of monastery that, and he's with Rokor, and he had a lot of things to say against modern psychology, and which I basically agree with him on. And so, like I said, I hope to have him on, and that's why I thought to do this stream, just commenting on the stuff they said. So here goes.
I just noticed. Good evening and welcome to the St. Maximus Society. We are going to do a follow-up video to our psychology part 2. We are very, very excited. That class had almost 10,000 views. So if you haven't done so yet, please like this stream, share it with people that are interested. Fathers, welcome back, Father Nathan, first of all. Happy feast day. We miss you, yes. We're going to do a deeper dive. Father Deacon, we're going to rely on you a lot to talk about what is it that people experience when they go into therapy. We're going to do a deeper dive on Carl Jung. We're going to even talk about Jordan Peterson. We're going to talk about whether Orthodox Christians should go to secular therapy or whether they should find, a spiritual father or a priest that is more in tune with their values. Let's do a deep dive. Father Maximus, I want to start with you. You mentioned last class that one of the problems with the paradigm of the West's view of human nature is that they don't understand what it means to be a human being. Can you expound on that just for a second? And that will kind of launch us into this class, I think.
Right. I think that this is, since the last class, I looked at all the comments we had, and there was some very, very interesting comments, and there was some criticisms of some of the things I said about Jung. I gave a very, very sort of thumbnail dismissal of it, which I read some stuff between now and then, and I realized that dismissal was pretty correct.
And I have to say, I mean, this is one of the first things I will say. To the point where Jung was getting involved in the spiritual, in the mystical, and frankly, he was a Gnostic. Yeah, like, get out of there. It's none of your business. It's not what you know about. And yeah, so like, I am very dismissive of the Jungian, and they talk about shadow work, right, as frankly a kind of demonic practice, and I would agree with them. So one of the main things which I have been trying to do with Fountain of Comfort is recognize that everything has to bow to God. Everything has to bow to God. Your plumber has to bow to God. Your doctor has to bow to God. Your mental health doctor has to bow to God, right? And that does not mean that your plumber is your priest, and that does not mean your bartender is your priest, despite the fact too many people, and they talk about it, seem to be using bartenders as priests. And that doesn't mean that your counselor is your priest. It's completely different. And it's particularly when we talk in areas of mental health, which is the easiest to confuse with your spiritual health, that it is most important, especially for the counselor, to know where they should bow out and stay out of it. And so the guy, second guy from the left, for some reason this is not showing the correct. Let me see if I can find the correct. So Father Deacon Stefan, I think is his name, is the one who used to be a counselor, and I think I mean they don't have their names and they don't address each other by names very much. He seems to be the one who had the experience of a counselor and talked very much about just because you have a Christian who is a counselor doesn't mean you're that person recognizes what is the proper place to be, and that's important. Now, frankly, if you are a devout Catholic, you should be going to a Catholic counselor. If you are a devout Jew, you should be going to a Jewish counselor, a religious Jewish counselor, right? And this is one of the points I might bring up with Father Maximus if we do get a chance to do the stream, which is, people look at people like Freud. Freud was not religious. He was not Jewishly educated. He was not basing his ideas on actual Jewish ideas. And so why would you go to a heretic? You wouldn't go to a heretic of your own religion. Why would you go to a heretic of someone else's religion for religious ideas? It just does not make sense. Noahides, good question. It is honestly a good question, right? Yeah. Use some of that Fountain of Comfort money for YouTube Premium. Not sure I'm going to do that, but yeah. I don't want to give more money to YouTube than I already am. Okay.
The problem is, in the West, they don't understand who a human being is because they don't understand that the soul has nous. It has a part that is superior to reason.
Okay.
And even though we say in the church logical sheep and rational sheep, we understand that the nous, when it is purified, has the ability to have direct knowledge of God. This is how the prophets saw things. This is how the ascetics saw things. They saw it through their purified nous. Right? We had one comment that says, no, nous is just mind. Well, that's like, the problem is it is just mind, but our minds in the fallen state are very seriously damaged. Right? So the problem with the West primarily is they theoretically, Thomas Aquinas acknowledges this in the West under the understanding of intellectus, but there is no effort whatsoever to integrate it into their spiritual understanding. So, to make a long story short, if that's possible at this point, you can't heal somebody if you don't know what they are, right? So if you're imagining you have a cat and you say, well, I don't believe it has a tail, and it's tail.
So the really important example, I think, is what happened with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, where her counselor told her, okay, your problem, you don't have a mental health problem, you have a spiritual problem. Go to church. Go to church. Right? And as the brother deacon or father deacon, I don't know how to address these people, said in the previous stream, right? He had somebody come in and he gave her an icon, right? And his supervisor went, hold on, like, can we give icons to people? Like, is this a service we're providing now? And it's like, no, it's not your counselor's position to give you an icon, but that might be what you actually need, is an icon. Which is funny because I actually gave somebody an icon who was going right before he was going to therapy. That's a whole other thing. But yeah.
Hell gets cynical. Then it's going. So the same thing inverted is you can't heal man if you don't know what a healthy man looks like. And in the West, they don't know what a healthy man looks like.
Okay, very good. One of the things we talked about last class, I want to do a quick recap, and then Father Nathan, I want to toss to you. We talked about the therapist essentially has replaced the priest in the West. We talked.
Yes, and that's wrong. It is wrong. It is not going to work. It is cancer, right? That is what cancer is, right? Your heart muscles are important and your brain cells are important. If you're growing heart muscle in your brain or brain cells in your heart, you're going to have problems. And that's what cancer is. The wrong thing growing in the wrong place.
Talked about there being a monetary incentive. Father Deacon brought this up for modern therapists and essentially for the pharmaceutical industry to address mental health instead of the priest and dealing with the noetic faculty of the the person that needs therapy, and that the West doesn't understand what it means to be human. Father Maximus, you just addressed the last topic. Father Nathan, how would you? What's your opinion on whether the therapist has replaced the priest in the West? I know that you hear a lot of confessions. What's your opinion about modern therapy versus the priest?
Well, there's a channel I enjoy on YouTube called Cinema Therapy, where a therapist and a filmmaker discuss films and the relationships in them. And they always introduce themselves as, I'm so-and-so, a therapist who enjoys films. And the other fellow says, well, I'm so-and-so, a filmmaker who needs therapy. And I pertain rather to the latter category. And so we'll see how much help I can be.
Incrediwear is the first wearable anti-inflammatory. Not only does it take away the...
Do you consider yourself a therapist oftentimes?
Absolutely not.
No. Okay.
Absolutely not. And I think that's a trap that some priests do fall into, is considering themselves qualified to be, let me qualify that. I don't consider myself as a clinical therapist.
Sure. Right.
And
I think he's absolutely right here. It's exactly what my rabbi told me when I went to talk to him about Fountain of Comfort. It's exactly what Mother Markella said when me and a couple of the board members went to talk to her about the Eastern Orthodox component of Fountain of Comfort. I had never suspected that a Greek Orthodox nun and a Hasidic rabbi would say pretty much the exact same things in different words.
I think that's a trap that priests can fall into, that you touched on in the last episode, that they can fall into thinking themselves qualified to treat people clinically,
right?
When they ought to be referring them to a specialist.
How does a priest know that, though? You know, we mentioned that there is a fine line between what Father Maximus said about a healing of the soul and a separation of the soul and, the mind or the body and the spirit. How does a priest really know what is in the realm of their job?
Well, Father Maximus very aptly touched on how it's important to understand what you're treating in order to treat it. And the same goes for this question. The priest needs to understand what clinical therapy is in order to differentiate it from his role as the spiritual father. Okay. Of course, it's ideal, as you said in the last talk, if the priest has a little bit of experience in that area, has had some training or some background in therapy.
I have to say, I think what should be standard for a priest, rabbi, or any other spiritual leader who is recommending somebody go to a therapist is to have a disclosure agreement where the therapist can talk to the spiritual guide about the contents of the therapy. And I have to say, if you are a parent and you are sending your child to a therapist, first of all, if your child is 10 or under, you should be in every single session. 100%. You should be there during the sessions. Maybe at some point once you have established enough of a relationship with the therapist that there's a reason why the therapist wants to talk alone with the child, maybe requires an actual situation. And you should always insist that there be a disclosure. Like, have your kid sign a disclosure for the therapist to talk to you about that your kid's private therapy sessions, but also with your spiritual guide. Seriously. And frankly, I think a good counselor and a good spiritual guide would work together. I know that there are people who are trying to do both at the same time, and maybe that is necessary for some things. But I actually think that it's worthwhile to separate the two out. I really do. Later on, he talks about Rogerian positive regard, which, as a spiritual counselor, you do have some measure of that. But as a spiritual counselor, you have to be able to say that is sin, right? Which is not something a clinician can do. That's different.
Just a long 3-hour video, which is not my kind of thing, on Carl Jung specifically. And I understand the attractiveness of it because he's used his very bright.
GN says, what is the difference between a therapist, psychologist, and counselor? Technically, anybody can be a counselor. There is no legal requirement for being a counselor. To be a therapist or psychologist or clinical counselor, you have to have a license in most states. Certainly in California, you do. Pretty much, I think, in every state. But generally, when people talk about that, it's similar things. But spiritual counseling and mental health therapy are very different. I had a Dr. Lockwood on recently, and one of the reasons I did have him on was he was like, if you don't have a diagnosis in the DSM, you should not be getting therapy. If you don't have a diagnosis in the DSM, you should not be getting it. You should not be having therapy. That's not therapy anymore. And he split it up into 3 different groups, right? The first group being people who actually have a mental illness and need therapy. The second group, he called it life sucks disease, right? People who are in a genuinely horrible situation, right? They just lost a bunch of family members, etc., right? And that's more crisis counseling. And frankly, do you really need a therapist for that? Probably not, but it's okay, and it might be necessary. And then there's people who just need a friend, right? The DSM-5 is fine, but like, and for those, frankly, it should not be a therapist. If anything, it should be a support group. And actually, so I haven't decided when we're gonna do it, but I am starting a support group for it's probably just going to be on Discord, a few people, and it's probably going to be around like Tuesday nights or something, or no, actually Tuesday. It's probably going to be Thursday, I'm guessing. I haven't decided yet. It also depends when people want it, but for like 2 hours, an actual support group, and group therapy is actually what you need if you have if you just need support. And psychiatrists usually only prescribe medications. That's a completely different thing. than 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 talk therapy. And usually, most people can't afford to have a psychiatrist do therapy for them.
Man, and he has a very he's very skilled at defining all these types of psychological phenomena.
Mhm.
Right, and then when you listen, it's like, well, that makes sense. That inner child and all the language we use, complexes. The only problem is he doesn't have the capacity to heal. He's a good diagnostician in the sense of seeing what's wrong with man. Aesop's fables will tell you what's wrong with man. You don't need to have a reassuring German PhD in order to make that. But his conclusions on how to fix things, how to solve things, are completely wrong. So I think maybe there is a possibility that we can use some of this therapeutic language, but we cannot use their ultimate understanding, because again, if you're trying to heal, a rabbit versus, a wolf, they're different things. So you can't simply just say, well, we're going to take this.
Would this make you buy a Ridge carry-on? 2 people could win a Lamborghini Huracan Sterrato, a Hennessy Velociraptor.
This worldly understanding and apply it to somebody. Man is made for divinity. He's built for a different purpose.
Mm.
And this, if I may jump in, this is something that I think, observe in various areas of literature. I felt that way about Anton Chekhov, that he was very good at pointing out problems, but he was also very good at pointedly ignoring the solution,
Right. Well,
which was the church.
anyone who's lived on Earth for more than a few minutes, it's very easy to find out problems. It's very easy to come up with,
You'll probably experience them.
guess what? We all have mothers and fathers, and they're imperfect people. So, of course, we have issues with our mothers and our fathers. We all grow up, and we deal with various traumas. Either we deal with them well, or we deal with them poorly, right? But so it doesn't take a great magician to put all this stuff together into some sort of coherent understanding. But I can see how people are attracted to it, because it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I had this, I had that. But it kind of reminds me a little bit of a con man. And cold reading, that's a separate thing. Do we have the? Let's
Yeah, Father Deacon, I
the
want
therapist test.
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
enjoying it.
he wants to hear what you all have to say before he jumps in. You had a lot of stories when we were talking. The chat was really kind of blowing up with stories about people in therapy that were in the chat, their families. Almost 100% of the people had a very bad experience from therapy, or they've had family members that have really, really had a bad experience through therapy. I would like you actually to take us through the different types of therapy, because you've done your research for the class. Thank you so much. Congratulations. What are some of the different types of therapy that people are undergoing? What are the different types of strategies for therapists, for counselors, for psychologists, for psychiatrists, other than medication? And how is that so different than what people are experiencing in the church?
Yeah, so great question. I'm glad there was a lot of honesty in the chat.
Yeah, they hate therapy.
That's fine. Yeah,
I'm not a big fan myself, so I'm going to play a big skeptic this episode again.
That's good.
Okay.
And I think it's that level of skepticism and lack of perhaps willing to be open, which either makes people go to therapy or not for different reasons. So when we talk about psychology, we're talking about this.
So just to be clear, vast majority of prescriptions for psychotropics are done by people with zero training in psychotherapy. It's usually general practitioners who are prescribing these things to people, and they have taken 1 semester of psychology. They generally have no clue what they're doing, and it's a bad idea. But that's where most of the prescriptions come from. It's very, very different. And so, honestly, I think they're giving things a worse name. Your family doc will give you an SSRI at the drop of a hat. That's exactly what's going on. And frankly, no, that it's this idea that it's all about economics. This is the Marxism that's infected your thinking. Vast majority of doctors are just are seriously just trying to help. They're not just like they're not even thinking about the money. They really aren't, and certainly not consciously. And so this Marxist suspicion, this hermeneutics of suspicion, honestly, that's a demon that's kind of possessing you.
Science of understanding behavior
Mhm.
In the mind, and as we see, it comes in a lot of flavors, and a lot of these flavors are something that's theoretical, and there's a bunch of theories out there, as you've seen, Jungian approaches, Freudian approaches. There are even wilder approaches, but the fact of the matter remains that the theory.
And frankly, Jung and Freud are basically out of favor right now. I don't know that in schools too many people are being taught Jung and Freud.
It has to be tied to a practice. So we, as Orthodox Christians, we have a actual tangible practice to our beliefs, how we worship. So the idea with psychology, and specifically this branch called counseling, is where we see this manifestation of what the psychological, but more the philosophical underpinnings are of a lot of these theories that are put into practice.
I don't want you to get distracted, but what you just mentioned is really important because the paradigm of the West differs so much from the East. A lot of these, and I mean Eastern Orthodoxy, a lot of the therapists, modern psychiatrists are coming from the vantage point and belief system of atheism, right? Evolutionary theory, even like, postmodern understanding of the world. Doesn't that in and of itself, like you said, lend itself to a bad outcome if they don't have the truth?
Yes. Like I cannot overemphasize how and I had I think Ryan, I forget Ryan's last name, I think it's Long. I had him on the Fountain of Comfort channel, and he's written books and is constantly talking about postmodernism just wrecking psychology, and it is.
Oh, for sure. And
Okay.
you can see that the center of the, when we talk about counseling specifically, we're talking with the subject, right? And the subject is the focus,
Okay.
right? And they're the source of truth. Now, when we look at Orthodoxy, we have a different source of truth.
Right,
We have
yeah.
Christ.
You have your truth. What's your truth? That's a modern saying.
Right.
Tell me
this-
your truth.
This subjectivity of truth.
Right.
Now, there's a difference between you are the one experiencing something and you're the best person to know what's actually happened to you as a reporter. Sure. But to
Sorry to interrupt, but this is important.
Mm,
The shooter who murdered my sweet little Daniel.
identify one's passions and then befriend them, as Jung has done and kind of instructs, is much different than the fighting of the passion, something that we're trying to actually get rid of so that we are, maybe not the best ones to know how to heal ourselves in all manners. So this happens the same in any type of, it can happen in a relationship with a spiritual father and a spiritual child, where the spiritual child is not as well informed of the spiritual life as perhaps the spiritual father. Now, the same type of relationship is found in counseling. And in that sense, the relationship becomes one of the most important things, is cultivation of rapport and whatnot. And so what lacks, though, is the center by which change is supposed to occur, the lens, if you will. So when we have an orthodox view of therapy, we can create practices that are not married to a certain belief system and use that and adopt them into an orthodox understanding.
What's the yardstick for success, though, again, I'm going to be the skeptic. What's the yardstick for success in a Western paradigm?
Yeah, so
Is it that, because a lot of the comments is, look, I went every day, a lot of people for X amount of years even, and all I did was become friends with a therapist. Like I didn't heal my
Yeah.
thoughts. I still had bad thoughts. I didn't feel better, right? Which
Yeah.
is, yeah.
and I would say that's it's really bad therapy, and it's clear that a lot of people have gone through really bad therapy.
It can happen with a priest too.
It can happen with the spiritual life. How many people have been to some really bad denominations or versions, I guess, of
Yeah, they've been, a lot of people say, I don't go to church anymore because I've
Let-
been burned by the
Let
church.
me interrupt to sort of try to create some.
You're not
sense.
interrupting at all.
When we say therapy, I think the problem is this can mean a whole host of things, different things to different people. You defined it in its proper sort of clinical way, but I think a lot of times people are using therapy in a way that is much more general. And so, if we actually examine the word itself, I mean, there's a very well-known book, Orthodox Psychotherapy by Metropolitan Herosius. So what we do as priests is a
I actually probably should look that book up and
clinical way. But I think a lot of times people are using therapy in a way that is much more general. And so, if we actually examine the word itself, I mean, there's a very well-known book, Orthodox Psychotherapy by Metropolitan Herosius. So
Orthodox Psychotherapy by Velocious. Okay. $50. It's been translated to English. It's by Metropolitan. This book sets out the teachings of the Holy Fathers of the Church on curing the soul. It has been increasingly established in recent years that orthodoxy is a therapeutic science. In order for a person to find health of his soul and really to know God and himself, he must first of all find the place of his heart. Finding and curing the heart is essentially finding salvation. It doesn't seems to be a lot different from thing. He's Bishop of the Orthodox Church of Greece and author of many books on Christian spiritual life and theology. Yeah, he's a theologian. 369 pages. Not sure that's what I was. Yeah, not sure.
What we do as priests is a kind of therapy. It is therapeutic. The first name that they gave to monks, St. Dionysius the Areopagite, he names monks, he calls them therapeutae, which means those undergoing therapy. So I think we have to make a very definite distinction between Orthodox therapy within the church with an Orthodox psychotherapist or something like that, and then the many other myriad of kinds of therapies that are out there. Is that a fair? I just wanted to.
Yeah, that's a fair point to make. And in Father Herotheos Vlachos's writings, he talks about that the church is a spiritual hospital, and the method by which the nous is purified, illumined, and deified is the true psychotherapy. We see that therapy is this vehicle by which a person comes to the knowledge of one's self. But there are myriads of different ways of how that comes about, and some not really too well. We talked about how there have been some bad therapies in general. In modern New Age psychology, you can't really divorce a lot of these things from the belief system or the philosophy that they're derived from. And so you're not going to get a lot of success with them.
So you shouldn't pay for it then.
Ideally, one shouldn't. And the beauty of this thing is that it's supposed to be free, right? It's supposed to be a way really for another person to, if you want to use colloquial terms, kind of show up for the other person. So that also is pretty broad.
When my team pitched the idea, I thought it was impossible.
Okay. I actually kind of sort of have to go. Didn't know if I would, how long I would be able to do this. And frankly, you can watch the rest of it yourself. I think I made the main points. I generally agree with the stuff that they were saying. There are a few things that I would like to clarify with Father Maximus. Yeah, I mean, the link is in the description. And I think I am actually going to end the stream because I have to go.